Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you. And as a brief intro, I'm Aley Baracat. I'm originally from Cairo, Egypt. And I am a creative technologist, game designer, and a musician. My work is focused on creating interactive, immersive experiences based on personal stories. I've worked with Punch Drunk, which is one of the biggest UK immersive theater companies in the R&D department, and then now I'm working with No Ghost as a creative technologist and a prototyper. And today's talk is called The Personal is Powerful, Storytelling and Intersectionality. So how do I start? Let's go back to 6 February 1996, which is my birth date. So yeah, I'm an Aquarius. And I grew up in a household with 6 other family members, and 2 of them are here right now, my sister and my mom, and my brother, my aunt, and my grandpa. And I remember having a very peaceful childhood. So I used to watch Lebanese drawing series with my mom instead of going to kindergarten. I used to play sports with my siblings, and I know my siblings because I'm the youngest one, and that's what you do. And I used to play sports with my dad and play the piano with my aunt and, yeah, hear my grandpa's stories. And then when I grew up and when I went to school, I started to notice that there is a disconnection internally that is happening to me, that I couldn't really be myself or authentic self in front of my school colleagues. So I remember asking my sister when I was 9 or 10, is it normal to have 2 different personalities, one at home and one at school? And the more I grew up, my coping mechanism was to build walls around me. And then the older that I got, the thicker the walls became. And that also, like these walls grew even bigger. In 2010, I was subject to a high school trauma. So I was subject to sexual harassment in school. And it was so hard for me to process that a friend was actually taking advantage of my, of being too naive or too passive. And my coping mechanism was to totally black out or like to shut this period of my life, and I couldn't really remember what happened or this phase. And it took me years and years to actually process that. So a few years back in Egypt, in Cairo, there was a Me Too movement, which is like a sexual harassment awareness movement that grew very big and quickly in Egypt. At 22 years old, Nadine Ashraf created an Instagram page called Assault Police, and they started collecting stories of people exposing sexual harassers, and as well people anonymously talking about their own experiences. And it wasn't until then that I was able to actually process and be able to acknowledge with myself first that this trauma. And it was very empowering to see people talking about this and people sharing their stories, and I was trying to find myself in those stories and learn from them. Which takes me to the idea of gatekeeping and the illusion of loneliness. Before that, I wasn't able to actually talk about it or to acknowledge it even to myself. And yeah, so I tend to believe that there is this illusion of loneliness, that it's harder to talk, especially with sensitive topics, and start conversation when no one is actually, when you don't have a platform where people are actually telling their own stories. Because you feel that people won't relate, and that might be the case, but it's important to have a platform where people are starting to share their own stories. And I realized that traumas and tensions and everything will be reflected in my own perception of the world. And the deeper I dive in my own insecurities, traumas, and thoughts and emotions, the more peaceful I become. And it's a never-ending process of trying to understand yourself and rediscover yourself from like different perspectives. And a book that really helped me in this process was called The Road Less Traveled. And one of the quotes that I really like is, once we truly know that life is difficult, then life is no longer difficult, because once it is accepted, the fact that life is difficult no longer matters. That made me very interested in the research of the power of embodiment. And embodiment is the idea of seeing the world from another perspective. So the power of embodiment in making people aware of their own inner tensions and uncovering privileges, bias, and subconscious blind spots. And I started doing that with myself. So I know that there is a story being told about me, and like there are different projections of myself with everyone I encounter, different versions of myself. And I wanted to start by owning my personal narrative and use art and games and every single tool that I have to explore myself and use the medium of games as a therapeutic tool for me. And I started doing that through journaling. So a few years back, I started in the habit of journaling, and before that, I really couldn't express myself through words. I was always tending to use music and play the piano and try to compose a piece about my emotions, but never talk about my emotions. So, however, this process of journaling, it was hard for me to start because I always had this inner critic that was asking questions, am I being too dramatic? Am I being too emotional? Am I too poetic in my writing? Is this grammatically correct? And yeah, and it rolls down to existential questions. Who am I? What am I doing here? And yeah, which is like not the point. And so journaling for me was, I started doing it without overthinking. So the first time that I actually grabbed the pen and just wrote, and of course I had to overthink the choice of pen and pencil and the choice of paper that I'm gonna write to have like this beautiful art diaries. However, all of this doesn't really matter. What matters is just like letting out emotions and thoughts on a paper. And there are no rules in how you express yourself. It's just, you can do what, you create your own rules in that. And it's so important to, as much as you can, is to shut down these intrusive voices and overthinking and try to just let this kinetic energy, because all of these thoughts will be in your head and they will have this energy and will be draining in some way or another. So having them on a piece of paper, it calms down this energy a little bit. So that was the main inspiration for my graduation project in Goldsmiths. So, I was starting to starting a course in the indie games masters in Goldsmiths while I was doing the journaling and all of that. So I thought maybe I can use the whole year to express myself through a project. And I created this project, which is one of my favorite, and it has a special connection to me, which is called The Game of Me, and it's basically a game of me. So it's an immersive installation about this journey, and a journey towards self-love and compassion, and channels my thoughts and emotions, and the process of the project itself was my own sort of therapy. And I tried to explore different technologies and different medias, from augmented reality, projection mapping, to creative coding, installation, design, and live music. So the installation was set as a room where you go inside and you have different modules where you experience the game. And each module talks about my personal life, and every single thing in the installation has a connection to my story and my narrative. And each time I exhibited, the project was it had a different installation. And it all started with this first page of me just expressing myself. And I thought I wanted to do something with a journal. I wanted to do a game that is based on the idea of me expressing myself. So I started sketching and just writing words or keywords that I wanted to include in the game or in the installation. And then I had this idea of making an AR game that is based on scanning different illustrations based on my personal life and trying to have a conversation with them. And all of these conversations was based on the journal, my personal journal. And then I thought, I want to create a more intimate setting for the game. So I wanted to, instead of have people looking at their phones is to make an installation and use projection mapping on top of a notebook to represent conceptually the projection of my thoughts and emotion, and have buttons where you actually read the stories, and the story has branching narratives, so depending on the choices you make, it will lead you to different parts of the story. Oops. That wasn't intended. Yeah. So, yeah, this is a diagram of the different components of the game, and there is I started with doing a VR prototype of my room, and then you have a conversation with the objects, and then I thought of making it a physical installation. I made the AR diary with the phone, and then I thought of using the projector instead of the phone, and then I made another module that complements this whole piece. So the two other modules were projection mapping of my memory. So on the wall, on the environment, you see projections of different locations, different notes, or different bits and pieces of the narrative. And when you flip the pages, the whole environment changed. And another module, which is the subconscious game, which was exploring the more subconscious expression. And it was based on my music. So I created a code that maps my original music. So I play the piano, and then it generates a whole environment based on my music. And then the whole game is about, it's a walking simulator in the music and following, basically, the music. So yeah, those are the different modules for the game: the projection mapping, the diary, and the subconscious game. And here's a video. I'm not sure if the sound will work. I don't think it's working. It's not working. But yeah. So at first, when I was developing the game, I didn't intend to actually, I wasn't sure that I'm going to be able to showcase it anywhere because it was very personal. However, at the end of the process, I thought that it's important, even though it's a never-ending process of discovering, exploring yourself, and understanding how you cope with the world and your mental model of the world. I thought it can be beneficial to actually share this installation and let people experience it. So I started exhibiting in different cities, like I exhibited in Berlin, and not here in London, in France, Lithuania, and Belgium. And every time I try to incorporate something different in the installation. And yeah, the last exhibition, which is one of my favorites, was in Belgium. And I did live music for the experience. And yeah, and it was very emotional to see how people react, how everyone becomes part of the piece when you actually have an installation, because everyone, all the side conversations, everyone watching, and all the comments become part of the experience, and it becomes part of the narrative. And I felt that before the experience and after the experience, people feel that they know me and they are comfortable enough to share their own stories and their own experiences after that, which is something that, for me, was so fulfilling. And yeah, I think that is thank you.
time for a couple of questions, if anyone would like to ask a question. You have to indicate using your hands, ideally.
Really enjoyed your talk, beautiful exhibition, the installation. Why did you use the augmented thing, and how did you make that in the notebook?
Okay, so why I wanted to have the...
I'm sorry, could I ask you to ask that again, but I've switched the mic on this time.
Yeah, really enjoyed your talk and the installation. My question is, why did you use the augmented instead of just written text in the notebook? And how did you make the projection happen in the notebook?
Okay, so why did I use the projection? So basically, it's not the story has branching narrative, so it's interactive. So depending on the choices you make in the using the buttons, so you have choices, it will lead you to different parts of the stories. It can be done in a totally analog way where you have like bits and pieces that you go through. However, I found that it was very immersive in a way to see the story getting written in front of you, or you're getting told the story, and you feel after a while that you're making the choices yourself, and you're deciding how the story will lead you. And that in itself, and using the buttons, made the people more immersed in the experience, if that makes sense. And how did I use it? I used like a camera, like an image recognition system that detects like the illustrations, and I made a projection mapping on the other page to project like the text and the narration. Yeah.
I think I saw another question. Sorry, you're further away.
Did you collaborate with anyone else for the art or music or anything? And if it sounds like you didn't, if you had, would that have made it less personal or?
Yeah, so for this project, it was like part of my master's graduation project. So it was individual, and I worked with psychotherapists in the journaling process and in understanding my emotions and thoughts process. I had an amazing advisor, Fede, and he really helped me a lot in the process and like trying to make the game come together and all of that. Yeah, so it was purely individual. Now that I'm working on more personal stories with the studio that I'm working on, it's a different experience when you have different stories and you're trying to kind of try to have every perspective in the experience. But it's a very similar process of trying to understand how you find your blueprint and how you find your own story and your own narrative inside the experiences, because it makes you design it in a different way when it's coming actually from you, because you become part of the audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And do we have one more question around? I'm sorry, I was approaching you because I saw you last time. I'm afraid this will have to be the last one.
Hi, I'm too loud for this microphone. Hello, I loved the interactivity of it and how you talked about the importance of getting people off their phones with augmented reality. I wonder if you'd considered how you might do a project similar to this in a way that means that people could access it at home without coming to a specific installation.
Yeah, so that's what I'm currently working on. So I have 2 different projects that try to incorporate the same idea. It's based on personal stories as well. I can't say too much, but it's based on personal stories. However, they are written in a way that is a bit anonymous. For me personally, I like the fact that, because it's my personal story, I like the fact that it's an installation and I'm part of the performance and you have to go somewhere to actually experience it. However, in the other 2 projects that we're working on, they are trying to have this more accessible so everyone can experience it from their homes and have this dual experience of the possibility of experiencing it by yourself or going to a place and having an installation version of the same experience. Yeah.
Please join me in saying thank you to Aley.